on a new data innovation challenge, Democratizing Our Data. I'm Christina Whitfield. I'm Senior Vice President and Chief of Staff at the State Higher Education Executive Officers Association. At SHIO and at our sister state associations, we hear loud and clear that state higher education, workforce, human services, and other critical state entities want and need more opportunities to be learning organizations, using their data to improve customer experience and outcomes for students and workers. It's my pleasure this morning to thank the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Ascendium, and the Overdeck Family Foundation for the data challenge opportunity you're about to learn more about. I'm helping to facilitate your questions during today's session, so please use the chat function freely. Our presenter today is Julia Lane from the Coleridge Initiative, which is a nonprofit working in partnership with state leaders and state associations like SHIO and NASWA to help government entities transform the way they access and use data, to create a foundation for bottom-up, state-driven products and projects. I'll turn the mic over to Julia now to discuss the opportunity at hand, which represents a great opportunity and investment by these three funders. I'm looking forward to learning along with you and talking more about the importance of data insights to inform policy and practice, and a significant funding and partnership opportunity. Thanks, Julia.
Well, thank you. And I want to just say thanks to everyone for taking the time to meet. And I very much hope that this is going to be a conversation when you ask questions. So I'm going to kind of fill you in on the data challenge for probably 10 to 15 minutes, and then ask people to jump in and ask questions. So you can put them in the chat, obviously. Christina is going to kind of give me the information, but without further ado, let me go ahead and get started. So this challenge, which you have seen on your website, is called Democratizing Our Data for a reason. Many of you in the audience are people who have been involved in the Coleridge Initiative in one way or another, and very much the mission, I think, of our organization, and I think a large number of organizations, particularly as you just heard from SHIO and NASWA, we are deeply committed to the notion that there is a massive capacity and interest in states and in using their data to answer questions that can address problems in their state and local regions. And the challenge is basically to support states in their effort to do just that. So here's what I'm going to do. And that's why it's called Democratizing Our Data. It is intended to be a bottom-up, state-driven approach to solving local problems using data. And I'm extremely grateful, as Christina pointed out, to the foundations who are listed on the site, and those who will be added in the very near future to who are supporting the vision here. So the goal of the challenge is, to build an empirical basis for understanding how education and training investments succeed or fail. And so that's a pretty clear-cut notion. That's why SHIO is here, why NASWA is so supportive. That the focus is on education and training investments and trying to figure out how to make things better. And you don't need to be told this is an absolutely critical time in this country with the massive changes in the labor market, massive changes and shocks to the education system. And really the issue here is trying to make sure that people aren't left behind. So there are a bunch of target populations that the foundations are interested in, and they're listed both on the website and here, but effectively we're looking at low-income earners, at-risk youth, underrepresented minorities, and formerly incarcerated individuals. So the notion here is there are a lot of people who are doing very well. There are some people who are being left behind, who can actually be major assets, not just to themselves, but to the United States. And so focusing in on how to make things work better, the education and training system work better. And so the second piece is, what are we going to look at? Well, part of the notion here is not just to look at their earnings and employment outcomes after they are credentialed, but the pathway and the transitions that they go through in the process of getting education. So interested as much in non-completers as completers, understanding what the contributors are to different sets of pathways that individuals might go through. And so the basic idea here is measuring that by describing different types of transitions, looking at economic mobility, new unemployment measures. You can see their leading indicators. So some creativity, state and locally driven subject matter experts identifying measures of indicators indicating that show likelihood of success or failure. You can see their examples of first-year persistence. How many in the initial cohort continue on into the second year? And time to completion is obviously an issue that has a big effect on student debt, for example. So the last kind of bucket, and these are the three that the funders were particularly interested in, and obviously we're very interested in it as well, are thinking out of the box. So, you know, one of the advantages of the philanthropic foundations is they have some flexibility in welcoming new ideas, welcoming new approaches, welcoming new measures. So if you could, as you're thinking about putting in a proposal, also be creative in how you approach these things. So other approaches that don't fit into any of these categories are also very welcome. You should email us at datachallenge@collegeinitiative.org, and then we're going to have a better, you know, we'll be building a portfolio of understanding of the questions that you have, because very much these questions have been driven by the states themselves. So what's the structure of the funding? We've been very grateful to the funding, the philanthropic foundations. It's at least $5 million. Our funders are actively looking for additional foundations to come in and contribute. To a large extent, the more creative the ideas that come in, the greater the portfolio that's likely to be developed. So this is the beginning of a conversation. There's going to be, we very much hope, stimulated by many of the ideas that you will have, but at least 5 million are committed at this point. Now, we worked with the funders and they identified roughly 3 tiers. And I'm going to talk about those in just a minute. And the basic idea there is there are some ideas that are very close to fruition that just with a minimal amount of investment could get pushed over into something that that can be adopted and used. And then there are tiers at different levels of maturity. The focus is very much on state agencies. They are typically the ones we expect to be in the lead. But working with universities, not-for-profits, and for-profits who are able to accept grants. There's the process. This is cut and pasted from the website, where the letter of intent date is in about 3 weeks, just over 3 weeks, October 20th. And we have a blue ribbon selection panel that will go through. And out of those letters of intent, a set of finalists will be selected. And we'll work with the finalists to develop a fully fledged proposal that is robust and likely to succeed. So the idea there is, we'll work very closely to make sure that the time investment is worth it. You'll notice, and then we'll make the first round of awards in mid-March or by mid-March. Now, then there's a second round of the challenge. And partly what we're expecting to happen here is many of you will get feedback, will kind of refine your ideas. We're also hoping that the most exciting ideas, we're going to obviously go and pitch them to many of the other philanthropic foundations who are paying attention. We've been getting a lot of attention from the community on getting this feedback. Then we'll move to round 2. So many of you already know this, but a lot of this came out of the interest across the country in data and evidence. So in 2016, there was a push at the federal level for evidence-based policymaking. That is actually how we got into this. We got asked to establish an administrative data research facility in order to inform the decision-making of the Commission on Evidence-Based Policymaking. And kind of what we did was we thought, well, you can't just put up a secure environment. You want to build the value proposition. What is the value of combining data? And the idea here was, instead of people in Washington deciding what the value is, go to the state, go to the local areas, have the ideas and the capacity be driven by the needs, the local needs and interest. And so we started off running 3 classes, and we thought we were going to be one and done. And we are now up to, I believe, 27, and we're still going. So you could see kind of how word of mouth has helped this training program develop. But key to that has been the ideas that came out of that training program. We have had over 120 super cool projects that have come out. And I think what happened was the funding agencies took a look at those 120 projects. All of them are on the website, by the way. So you can go on and click on that carousel of the pictures. And they said, holy cow, there are so many interesting ideas there. What about if we encourage states to take some of those ideas and create and take the next step? So essentially that's what this collaborative is about. Not the collaborative, this challenge is about. Many of you have already been on and seen some of the flagship things that have come out of Kentucky and Ohio and Indiana and Tennessee, which is both the multi-state post-secondary report. That's an example of an idea that came out of a class, then was invested in, and now is scaling to multiple states. Many of you have also seen the unemployment to re-employment dashboard, particularly given very detailed information, obviously all security and confidentiality protected, but understanding what's happening to, for example, African Americans in very detailed areas. And in fact, with that unemployment to re-employment dashboard, Employment and Training Administration funded training classes, and we were serving agencies in almost 30 states. So the notion that I think took hold was this idea that great ideas come out of individual states. We can invest in those and then do a rinse and repeat. Every state doesn't have to develop everything from scratch. If we build the collaborations across states, they can have great ideas, take them and scale them. So that was kind of, this data challenge is driven by your ideas. So now what we want to do is figure out how to scale. So in order to minimize the burden, this is the structure of the letters of intent. Standard kind of basic information about who's submitting, brief executive summary, kind of the interest areas, the previous work, and list the data sets that will be used. Now, one of the key issues here is we want to support projects that that are already ready to go, where the data are agreed to, where they can be combined, where there's projects that are almost shovel ready. And so those data sets in general should be available, and ideally with states that are already participating in the ADRF or in partnership with a state that's got data in the ADRF. And so those letters of intent, you know, this is a very practically oriented thing. This is not a research program. This is not intended to help people get a paper in a scientific journal, although obviously we want good science to be at the core. But it's how we can build products that have value to inform education and workforce programs, and, you know, lead to sustainable infrastructure. So my experience, and many of you know that we've built large-scale infrastructures in the past, my experience is if you can describe something that has value, the excitement that comes then leads to resources. We're really interested in getting resources, following great ideas to the states, so that there's a funding line that over time can be built, can be scaled, and really get some traction. So that's the key idea. Programmatic improvement, you know, a lot of people interested, really important questions, and some idea of sustainability. Philanthropic foundations are great, fantastic. They're great for getting ideas started, and I can attest to that. It was philanthropic foundations that got STAR metrics going, and the LEHD, many of the other things that I've started. But at the end of the day, you need line funding for long-term programmatic improvement. So an eye to how that might go. And as we say, the products, innovative products. Creating a new linked data asset's fine. Dashboards and portals are obvious, but APIs that people in your community can make sense of. And maybe high school students can take the API and create cool visualizations and so on. Code repositories that provide standardized code for earnings and employment measures, or completion measures, or non-completion measures, or measures of firm demand, and so on. And then obviously partner with an organization with data in the ADRF. So there are a lot of states who don't have data in, a lot of people do, but they can also partner and just learn. Just like with the ETA class, there were, Illinois provided the data, and there were 28, 29 states working with the Illinois data, and that's a perfectly reasonable model. So let me give a couple of, or three concrete examples, and then I'll open it up to questions. So operationalize innovative ideas that just need a small amount of push. So you could imagine partnering with the university, or hiring a postdoc or a graduate student or a contractor to push something over the top. Scaling, taking a cool existing product or idea that you have and expanding it to another agency in your state, or partnering with a contiguous state, or a state with a similar industry structure or education system to expand. And then tier 3 is a lot more money, but really to use the ADRF and potentially with training programs, which would obviously run throughout this, to produce and test new products. So here's an example of that came out of the ETA class, which is thinking about new measures of unemployment. So, we're so used to thinking about point in time as someone unemployed or employed for an hour a week in the survey week. And what this team in the class looked at was, why don't we look over a period of time? We have data on UI claims for 37 weeks. Wouldn't it be cool to look at the experience of people in a 37-week period? And you can say, are they always on unemployment? Are they exhausting? Do they move into and out of unemployment claims? So, and how does that vary by education category and by industry and by age group? Because understanding people's experiences can then inform educational investments, new workforce boards, for example. So that's an example of a new measure that could be developed and scaled and handed to all states that are working with UI claims data to generate new measures. Another example is and I'm sure you've all seen this, is the MultiState Dashboard that Kentucky developed in an Ohio state class, and then joint with Tennessee and Indiana and Ohio started to look at the people in northern Kentucky. This was which borders on Cincinnati, Ohio metro area. Where do my people go? Where do the people who graduate out of northern Kentucky go? Where do they get jobs? How much more insight can I get from being able to look at cross-state flows? And the advantage with this is Kentucky started it, but they worked with their sister states to find a common data model. And then, just like the unemployment to reemployment dashboard that I showed you earlier, it's essentially just a drag and drop. So instead of every single state having to develop a dashboard, by sharing, that everyone can build on and contribute to success. And then the third example, which might be a bigger investment, the two great states of Arkansas and Alabama combined to develop a UI claims resource planning dashboard. So trying to figure out what is a conceptual framework that can help us understand from soup to nuts what the inform the workforce boards in their state. So they've been working directly to develop the product with very important people delivering training programs in the state. And that's an example of developing a whole new product that goes across state lines and across agencies, but that would be very exciting. So let me pause there and see if anyone has any questions. So let me stop sharing and see if there are any questions. I know I went relatively quickly because I wanted to get to the comments and ideas that you had. So Kim Kirkpatrick, you're not usually shy, so I'm going to ask you to get the conversation going.
Well, as I've mentioned, I try not to be redundant, and I know that I've said the same thing several times, but we, like other states, are trying to measure these certificate completions and the value added to the workforce, stackability, how that applies. We want to identify the ones that do add value versus the ones that potentially don't, include them in our completion goals. And I feel like I've said that so many times that everybody knows it, but we would like to know, because what we can see in the certificate data we do have is that most of them stay in the state, But so it's not so much this as the credentials of value or the certificates of value, tracking them out. Although for the bachelor's degrees and whatnot, we certainly want to be able to do that. But for the certificates, it's determining the value add.
Yeah, and I think that's right. So part of the idea here is, you know, the potential to look at and carefully define certificates, because we talked about this on Friday, because you can't boil the ocean here. You know, see what the completion rate is, again, carefully defined, and then look at the flows across state lines.
Yes, this whole return on investment question keeps coming up. And even what you just said with rate, is like rate, what's that denominator? Is it everybody that enrolls in the program? Everybody that completes the program?
You got it.
So that whole sense of numerator and denominator and what should be in order, what should be, how it should be presented, or what information should be compiled. As you know, we looked at certificate completers only. What would it have been like for tracking wage records into, employment outcomes of the non-completers? How would they have compared? So there's so many interesting questions and ways to look at this. And I would love to see the value add of stackable. So comparing single certificate earners, and like you said, defining this is going to be super difficult because not everybody understands whether there, or some of our short-term certificates, the stackability issue is a big question.
And the certificate issue, as you've seen in the call, is a very big one. So, you know, one example of what you might be able to propose, Louisiana does not have data in the ADRF, but you have lots of friends who do, right? So, and you met many of them in the classes. So you could cozy up to some of your friends and say, I'd like to propose a joint project in which we work with you guys to develop new measures, systematic measures that could be scaled to other states, right?
Well, I have Heath from Texas in my group. And so I feel like, they're the next one to go through this ADRF. I could hit him up with, hey, don't you want Louisiana data? We could partner with you.
Right.
So,
or
of course,
your friend.
Of course, Texas data is so much bigger than Louisiana data. So
yeah, Texas has pointed out several times to me they're a very big and important state.
Yes, they are that. So how much value added would it be to track people that go from Texas to Louisiana? I don't know. It's obviously more beneficial.
I don't want to. Each state has to make their own decision. I'm seeing Robert Magoo from Arkansas sitting there, and it may, and we can certainly help. Clearly, we don't want people reaching out directly to individual states, but more we can help facilitate the conversations around the art of the possible. So that's a very good point, Kim. But you could imagine you'd want to bring in also the people who are interested in achieving the credentials. Who's going to use the information about the credentials? Not just whether you can produce them, but who cares that you produce them? So I think that's part of the conversation.
Well,
Mizuzu,
the outcomes-based funding is a good one that comes to mind.
That's right.
Whether they're included or not. So value add makes a case for them to be included in some kind of state funding.
That's exactly right. So, putting the idea down succinctly, having identified a sister state who'd be interested in partnering with you, and then developing a very clearly defined project that could be adopted and used because there'd be buy-in from multiple places, and that has a value proposition, because that's where the sustainability come from. A question from Mizuzu about putting data in the ADRF. You could reach out to us and we'll work with you with that. There's typically a fixed cost per state that is based on the number of data sets and the number of users. What we'll be doing, obviously, for this data challenge is wrapping that cost into the data challenge. So, you know, there's a on-ramp associated with it. So the funders are very interested in supporting people putting data into the state and into the ADRF. I see a number of states here in which that their participation has been fully subsidized. Laura Faulkner, it's been hard for nonprofits to broker the relationships. We would encourage you to come to the table with the relationships already. Kim is from a state agency, and so, you know, she's already part of the conversations there. We're not directly in the brokering business, although if you have a really cool idea, we can certainly circulate it with the state agencies who we're working with and see whether they get excited. So give us your cool idea, and we're more than happy to socialize it, because everyone's always looking for really good ideas. So does that answer your question, Laura?
Yes, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So, you know, go back to the basic letter of intent. You know, programmatic impact that is of key interest to stakeholders and that has a sustainability model associated with it. You know, I think you hit those three, and I'm sure that there'll be agencies that are interested in the ideas. Tim, can the intent focus solely on products and services that target data challenges such as data cleansing, manipulation, prediction, modeling, matching? Yeah, so I think tools are also very helpful, but what you'd be wanting to do is to show that it's going to help programmatic agencies do their jobs. So, you know, I think, for example, of Jupyter Notebooks, look how powerful that's been as a tool to help agencies do their jobs. If there's evidence of success in developing those, and you've got people lined up for those tools, or agencies lined up because it's going to help them get their products to the programs faster, and you can demonstrate that, absolutely. Right? So that in itself is a product. You know, just to emphasize, it is better to submit than not, even if it's the earliest stages of a good idea. The whole idea between that letter of intent is not to make it an insuperable obstacle. It is, you know, let's get 1,000 flowers blooming, and you're going to get good feedback through the process. The more and the richer the ideas that come out, the more likely there's going to be more than 2 rounds of funding, right? So, you know, have at it, let it come, and we'll work with you, and we'll work with the agencies to make sure that, you know, every submission gets a good feedback. So Marigold, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. Have I answered your questions? Because your work is so interesting as well.
Yes, I think so. I mean, actually, I know this is perhaps beyond the purview of what we're talking about here, but or the purpose, but I am really interested in the other participants on the call and what other folks are working on. And are there ways that you all potentially could help create opportunities to collaborate or just talk? Because I mean, Julie, I think you're referencing, I mean, our group, and I have another colleague, Kaisa Royer, who's also on this call from our partner group at the University of Utah. We're working on data collection for higher education in prison programs across the country, and also thinking about programmatic data related to students, so completion credentials, progression through programs, and also eventually a move towards student level data for higher education in prison programs, primarily focused on students who are currently incarcerated, but also thinking about students who have progressed or matriculated onto a campus. So not necessarily a question per se about the project. I think you've previously in conversations addressed that this is something that you'll be interested in, and the focus on currently incarcerated.
Absolutely.
But also just maybe a open opportunity or invitation to talk to others who might be thinking about either currently or formerly incarcerated students as parts of their data set, or have already been working in this area.
Mary, you've look at the great questions. Can you believe, like, this is the whole point of this data challenge, is the great ideas and the learning and the networks that come out of, you know, really local and state driven concerns, right? So I'm sure everyone's listening to you, Mary, has listened to every single person who's spoken up here and thought, oh my goodness, I'd like to know more about, you know, what do we have? We had 70 people on the call. I'd like to know more about what everyone else is doing. So we were planning on doing a kind of convening. Maybe it'll be in Zoom, maybe it'll be in person after the LOIs are in, so that everyone can learn from everyone else and maybe build stronger proposals for the next time round. And we'd invite funders to come to that convening. So part of the reason to encourage you to come out with many ideas is that building the collaborations and the networks from one state to another state across ideas so to answer your question, Mary, absolutely. We're intending to build a rich and deep community of practice. And part of that is going to be after the first round convening, and then also after the second round convening. And I see you put your email in. Is this limited to data in the United States? It is very much a US focused activity. And as you can tell, and I always tell the story, I am from the deep South. So I'm from New Zealand originally, but I married a Yank. So, but unfortunately, New Zealand associated data sets are not part of the call. It's in the United States. Lots of interest in partnerships with universities. The universities themselves don't have to be in the United States, although it'd be ideal if they were the state university. So I see David Seith's on the call. So David is with Rutgers. And of course, they partner very closely with the great state of New Jersey that can't make decent pizza. So we kind of run that whole line together every time we talk about New Jersey that can't make decent pizza. But that is the, that's kind of an ideal for us. But that doesn't mean that you can't have great ideas that you're partnering with outside universities. It's just a stronger, longer lasting relationship if it's with your local university. So Tim, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Oh, Leslie Hirsch. I mean, she knew I was going to talk about that, right, Cheryl? So you knew I was going to slam New Jersey every chance I got. So Siambade, have I made sense here? Any questions?
Yes, you have. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. We are still currently working on with DOL to be able to get the UI data, and it's still ongoing. That's the challenge we have right now.
Well, we're happy to work. We're happy to work with anyone and everyone. So please also feel free to reach out. We have obviously worked with a lot of lawyers and a lot of agencies to make this happen. And even if you can't get it done in time for round 1, you know, we can shoot for round 2. So we're very happy and very happy to use the funding to provide, you know, the subsidy, so that the cost is not a barrier, that that is facilitated.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and something from California community colleges. Yes, California is also a big state. So about just LA County is, I think, twice the size of my entire country. Absolutely, that could be, would be thrilled. There's a lot of interest in the community college system in California, and you could do a tier 2 or a 3 effort, absolutely. And you know, again, be thinking about, you know, maybe you start, I've learned not to boil the ocean. So maybe you might have a staged process, right? Because if you try and do every single county, I believe California's, like, if it were by itself, it's about the 6th or 7th largest economy in the world. So you might want to think about having a coalition of the excited and the willing and developing products around that, but then have a sustainability plan where it could get scaled to other counties in your great state. Does that make sense, Mark?
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
And we actually, we're entering into a partnership with California Department of Human Services. So some of those data, there's data already involved, and their data integration effort is really quite inspiring. John Ohanian is leading that, and Natasha Nikolai. So feel free to reach out, and we can chat as well. You could send the email to, and Nate, if you would put it in the chat, if you would send an email to datachallenge@collegeinitiative.org.
Thank you, I will.
Great. And you can also just email me directly or text me. Sometimes I get overwhelmed with emails, so you can text me and I'll put that in the chat. But just tell me who you are so that I don't think you're a random prince from a foreign country. Well, actually, a real prince from a foreign country would be really nice, but not a random prince.
Our own Shiambadi is a prince from Nigeria. Really, legitimately. Yeah.
Really?
So yeah, so you've got it right here.
Wow, I'm
Can you
impressed.
Yeah,
No.
I'm embarrassed to talk to the guy. His manners are so much more refined than mine.
Well, yeah, but you're from New Jersey, David.
I
We've
know,
already
I can't help it. I
appreciated,
try to tell him.
identified the baseline here. So, any other questions? Robert Magoo, do you have a question?
No questions, just excited.
We're excited. Well, we're always thrilled to have you on a call. Marina, great question. So we're kind of acting as kind of the middle people here, because the states don't want to be inundated. But what you could do is, if you have, as I said, some ideas, Marina, put them in a kind of an outline form, you know, why they would care. We have had a lot of conversations with Washington State, so I do know that there is a great deal of interest there. I'd be happy to fill you in on the conversations with Washington. And I can certainly fill you in on once I've got your idea, we can kind of at least make the connections or get a sense of what the states might be interested in doing with you. Does that make sense?
Sounds good, Julia. So should I maybe send that directly to the general email data challenge Coleridge? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we'll circle back with you, because usually what we do is kind of talk with you one-on-one, kind of flesh out the ideas and kind of brainstorm a little bit.
Okay, that's great.
Be
Thanks.
happy to help.
Yeah, it's great.
That's great. Ariel. Oh, yes. I don't know if anyone from Massachusetts is on the call, but if you want to get in touch with us, there are a bunch of people from Massachusetts who I'm pretty sure would be interested in working with you. I know that Rutgers, Sean Simon, has been leading this with Connecticut, an Eastern collaborative, and that they'd be really looking to make those connections.
Yeah, and we've actually been on those calls. So I'm really excited to see that this opportunity is coming forward. So we'd love to try to get maybe a tri-state proposal in.
Oh, that would be absolutely in the sweet spot. That would be fantastic. So yes, a joint effort would be fantastic. And you know, what you could do is you could partner with a state that already has data in or is very close to getting data in and put in the proposal that way. And you know, kind of building these networks and these relationships and ideas, and just the power of collaboration is kind of what we're trying to do here.
And a quick follow-up question on that. I know that you had mentioned that sometimes getting the data into ADRF is subsidized, and how, I guess, would we go about doing that? Let's say we made a proposal for the tri-state. I don't believe Connecticut or Massachusetts has data, and I know that Rhode Island does not. So none of us would kind of be in that position of already having data in the system. So just curious how we could navigate that.
Yeah, so a couple of things is, one is you could add to your state and add in New Jersey, which does have data in and has been very proactive and imaginative in some of the ideas. But the other approach is to start the process, and we have been talking to Connecticut. They've been very interested, as you probably know. And we kind of have a standard template. It's a matter of how complaisant your lawyers are in the different states. But we do have Robert, I think for Arkansas, it was just a matter of a few months, but that's because Robert is a force of nature. Other states, it's taken a couple of years. So it depends on the state, I think. Robert, do you want to talk through your experience with that?
That's not all me. We've got our great CPO, but we built a standardized state data sharing agreement, and that made a big difference. It used to take longer.
Yeah, Arkansas is great with this kind of stuff.
Great, thank you. And we actually almost have that interstate or that interagency data sharing agreement in place. So I think that will be a great platform to maybe make this argument. So thank you.
Yeah, and you know, what you may want to do is you kind of don't want to boil the ocean with the lawyers, because if it's too big, they get really freaked out. So typically what the best approach is to start with a very well-defined project, right? So the canonical elements are safe projects, safe people, safe settings, safe data, safe exports. So safe projects, so you're defining a project quite clearly that has enormous value to your state. The second thing is safe people. So you can define, you know, you can ring fence the people in the approval process, and we can help you with that. The safe settings, the ADRF is a FedRAMP certified environment. It has authorization to operate from the US Census Bureau, from the US Department of Agriculture, from the National Science Foundation, and authorization to use from Department of Health and Human Services, all of federal agencies. And so that, and it's hosted data now for almost 15 states. So that safe settings, you know, there's a whole set of checklists on FedRAMP, and then the agencies, lawyers feel very much more comfortable about that. Safe data.
Did you want to say, Julia, about FedRAMP real quick, just how hard that is to get? I mean,
oh my God,
that's really a high bar. Very few states can do this themselves. And so I think there's a concern about releasing data to researchers, right? But this is a place that's like a bank. I mean, it's in the safe, right? It's all hashed, it's all de-identified before you even touch it, right? Not to belabor this,
I
but I
think
just don't
that's a
think people
really
understand.
good point. So it's the 5 safes, and it is, you know, it takes a very long time to get approval, and it's a continuous approval
wow, it's
process, and it's fully certified. So that makes the lawyers really happy as well. And then
I can
so
vouch for that. You really do feel like you're signing away your firstborn and every other child thereafter you have if you talk about it. Like, don't even talk about it. Don't think about it out loud. It is very secure.
it is very secure.
Very secure.
Although I didn't realize I could get rid of my firstborn that easily. I've been trying to give the kids away for a very long time, but it never got me out of paying their college tuition. So, but so, you know, it's the 5 safes, Ariel: safe projects, safe people, safe settings, safe data. So it's de-identified. We use a certified hashing algorithm to de-identify it, so there's no SSNs or names floating around. And then safe exports. It's the Roach Motel, as Kim will tell you. Data come in, but they have to be aggregated before they leave. Does that make sense? And that makes and Ariel, if you want to ping me, we can send you kind of the standard template, and happy to have a conversation with the lawyers. Well, maybe that's putting it a bit strongly. I am willing to have a conversation with the lawyers because I've had many conversations with the lawyers and have found that after a few beers, it's horrible. That's a joke.
Nathan's probably laughing because I think we have the most lawyers in our state. You'd have to hit every bar in town to have convincing with the lawyers.
And what's
we
the
have
problem?
A lot of
what's
bars
the problem
too.
with that?
We have a lot of bars too in Louisiana. So between the lawyers and the bars, you're going to spend a lot of time convincing.
Okay, I'm down for that. Okay, any other questions? Well, this has been a terrific conversation. I'm thrilled. I can't wait to see the LOIs. Please do reach out, ask any questions that you could. My colleagues at NASWA and Christina, presumably you have some closing comments, if you would.
Hi, this is Yvette Chocolat, Workforce Policy and Research Director at NASWA. We've just loved the partnership between the state agencies, the workforce agencies working with SHIO, working with the folks at the Coleridge Initiative, Ohio State University. Really excited to see what great ideas come out of this and supporting you in every way we can. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. And Christina, you opened, and could you close?
Yes, thanks, Julia and Yvette. I want to echo what Yvette's sentiments about SHIO support for this project. If there, especially there are representatives from SHIO agencies on this call that would like to talk about potential projects or ideas that we could be supportive of, I'm happy to network with folks. And thank you again to the funders and to Julia and to all of you for your attention to this important conversation today.
Thank you so much. Look forward to getting your email questions, and thanks to the great team who's putting this together. Thanks, guys. Okay, bye-bye.